So before I start any other work, I'm gonna pull this main fuse and pull the battery out. So here, I'm just using a 10mm wrench, or you can use a Phillips screwdriver. So before you drain your oil, just pop up your dipstick so it drains a little easier. So now I'll drain the engine oil. Just loosen up this worm clamp, or you can remove it, and then just take out the plug and it'll drain right out. So now I'll drain the primary. You have this plug right here, and it's a 5/8. Now with the primary drain plug, I will change out the O-ring. I'll clean this plug up. I'll put some Teflon tape and reinstall it. So here I'm just using an oil pump extractor. Here I have the drain hose that's going to the drain pan. And here you have the suction hose that's going to the bleeder valve. And I just had this hooked up to the battery that I took off the bike. I'll take the reservoir cap off. Now this cap here, it does say .4. Now do I know if it has .4 fluid in it? I do not know. Either way, we're flushing all these lines out, and then I'm gonna replace it with some .4 fluid. So there is a sequence to bleeding out these brake lines. I'm not doing that right now. I'm just sucking these out completely so I can take the brake calipers off without making a mess. You just want to be careful with this .4 brake fluid. If it touches any paint, you definitely want to clean it off right away or it'll damage the paint. And same thing with the front. I'll pop off this bleeder cap. And I'll do a 1/2 inch turn on the bleeder valve. So all of this is getting replaced, but if you are just doing a fluid change or you're just bleeding your brakes, when you take this cap off, just set it down on the bottom side. Don't set it on the top upside down, because when you do put this cap back on, you do run the risk of fluid coming down and possibly getting all over your parts. Not a big deal. You can just take a rag and clean them up. Now this screw is in here pretty good. I might have to tap this one out. Now this does say .4, but like I said, you never really know what's in here. So either way, we're flushing these out, and I'll replace it with some .4 fluid. Now whatever you do, don't pull this lever, because this will squirt out. Now that I sucked all the fluid out of the brake lines, I'll close this bleeder valve. And here I'm just using a water bottle to flush out my lines. So now I'll remove the controls, the turn signals, and the mirrors off the handlebar. So for this one mirror, I'm using a 1/2 inch socket for this nut. So for the clutch lever, you have this pin here, and there's a C-clip on the bottom. So I'll just pop these two plastic clips off, and then I'll take this plastic sleeve and slide it up so I can get to the adjuster. And then I'll just turn this up to loosen up the clutch cable. So I'll just pull back on this clutch cable and pop it out. Then you can just pull this pin out. And completely remove it. So for this grip, it just twists right off. And for this left turn signal, I'm just gonna follow the cable down, cut the zip ties, and I'm using a plastic prying tool to pop these clips out. Now here, I'm gonna remove this headlight bracket. I'll remove these 2 screws, and they're a 1/4 inch Allen. So here you have your 2 connectors for your controls. The gray is the left and the black is the right. Now the left and the right turn signal are connected by 1 connector. So for the left controls, you have a screw on the top and on the bottom. And for these, I'm using a T25. And now I'll take out these 2 Torx screws, and these are a T27. So when removing this clamp, it's just holding on to your clutch lever housing and your turn signal. And this piece here is just for your grip. Same thing with your brake lever. You have this pin and there's a C-clip on the bottom. Same thing with the top and this bottom Torx screw. They're a T25. Now with both of these shorty levers, I might get them powder coated and reuse them. Now these will pop right out and you don't want to lose them. And these just pop right out. So like I said, I am going to keep all of this just in case I reuse it for something else. So if you are going to store this and save this for later, just don't keep your throttle adjuster screwed all the way up, because you'll keep that spring compressed and it'll just stay that way. You want to have some slack in it. That way it doesn't keep that spring compressed. So when removing this brake line, it's easier if it's mounted. So I'll just take this clamp off and remount it. And to remove this brake line from the master cylinder, I'm using a 12mm wrench. So there's still going to be some fluid inside this line and inside of here. So just be aware of that when taking this bolt out. So how this screw works, you have this channel inside of here, and then you have this hole on the bottom that leads out to your brake line. And for this turn signal, you just thread it out from the bottom. So now I'll finish removing the brake line. You have a clamp on the top of the triple tree here, and it's a 5/16 socket. And then you have a clamp on the bottom, and it's a 3/16 hex bit. And here's your entire assembly from your brake line to the brake caliper. So now I'll remove the handlebar. I'll take off this top clamp, and you have these 4 screws, and I'm using a 1/4 inch Allen. So now I'll remove the triple trees. You have a bar going down the middle, and then I'll just loosen this up and take it out. You have a pinch screw on the side, and it's a T45. So now I'll loosen up the fork stem bolt, and for this, it's a T55. And here you have the bolt and the washer. So when you're taking this top one off, just make sure you're supporting the bottom and then just work them out. So here we have the front fork upper bracket and the front fork lower bracket and stem. And then on this you have a seal, a bearing cone, and a bearing cup. So now I'll remove the oil filter. I'll put some pig mat under here so it makes less of a mess. So I do have a funnel with a hose that slides under here that I have leading out to the drain pan. And then I'll just take a nail and drive it at an angle so it pokes a hole at the bottom. Just helps it drain a little easier. And to take this oil filter off, I'm using an 11/16. So I'll remove this right side cover that's housing the engine oil reservoir and the dipstick. You have this clip on the bottom, just pry down on that with a screwdriver and it'll pop right off.